Imagine being the ruler of the wealthiest city on Earth, only to watch the world around you violently burn to the ground. The year is 413 AD. The unstoppable Roman Empire is cracking. Visigoth barbarians have just sacked the eternal city of Rome itself. Panic sweeps across the east. If Rome can fall, what about the glittering jewel of the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople? Worse yet, a terrifying new threat is riding in from the Eurasian steppes. Attila the Hun is hungry for gold and glory. The child emperor Theodosius II is terrified. But his chief advisor, Anthemius, looks at a map and makes a radical decision. The old wall of Constantine is simply too small to protect their expanding, wealthy population from these new, aggressive super-barbarians. Anthemius realizes they don't just need a barricade. They need an impenetrable, multi-layered medieval meat grinder to crush any foolish invader. Massive construction begins immediately. Thousands of workers haul alternating layers of tough limestone and flexible red clay bricks. These specific red bricks aren't just for show. They act as ancient shock absorbers against the region's frequent, devastating earthquakes. They aren't just building a wall. They are terraforming the landscape into a three-tiered fortress of absolute despair. Fast forward to an invading army approaching the city. They confidently march forward, expecting an easy siege and quick plunder. But as the morning fog clears, they stop dead in their tracks. Weapons literally drop from their trembling hands. Looming before them is an impossible structure, a deep moat, an outer wall, and a towering, untouchable inner fortress. This is the legendary Theodosian Wall system. For the next 1,000 years, dozens of mighty empires will try to breach it, and for 1,000 years, they will be utterly humiliated. Welcome to Level 1 of the Byzantine Empire's ultimate defense. The first thing an invader faced was the moat. But this wasn't your average cute castle puddle. It was a massive trench, 20 meters wide and 10 meters deep. That's a 5-story building laid on its side. Its primary job? To stop massive, terrifying siege engines from ever getting close to the main walls. Try pushing a 50-ton wooden tower over this, and it immediately face plants into the abyss. So the barbarians decide to just swim or wade across. Simple, right? Nothing a little mud can't fix. Wrong. The Byzantines built hidden brick walls and dams entirely submerged underwater. Invaders would suddenly smash their shins, get tangled, and become perfectly stationary sitting ducks. While they were stuck in the mud, Byzantine archers on the lower wall would casually practice their target shooting. Oh, and the moat wasn't a stagnant pond. The defenders completely controlled the water flow through a network of secret pipes. If enemies tried to dig tunnels underneath, the Byzantines would just open the valves and literally flush them out like a toilet. At this point, most sensible armies would reconsider their life choices and go raid a defenseless village instead. But let's say a few incredibly lucky barbarians survive the mud, the traps, and the water and crawl up the other side. They take a deep breath, give a thumbs up, thinking the worst is over. Then they look up. They realize they haven't even touched a real wall yet. Welcome to Level 2, the Outer Wall, also known as the absolute, perfectly designed killing zone. The space between the moat and the outer wall is called the peribolos. To an exhausted invader, it looks like a safe terrace to regroup, but in reality, it was a carefully calculated kill zone. There was absolutely zero cover, nowhere to hide. The outer wall stood about 8 meters tall, lined with highly trained archers who had a perfect elevated view of the mud-soaked survivors. Because the wall was curved and dotted with jutting towers, the Byzantines didn't just shoot straight ahead. They shot from the front, the left, and the right. This created a literal rain of death. Barbarians couldn't shield themselves from every direction at once. If you block the front, your backside gets pinned. It was an architectural meat grinder. Invaders were perfectly trapped between a water-filled moat behind them and a barrage of arrows above them. Those who didn't want to look like human pincushions would frantically try to raise ladders against the outer wall. But the wall was just high enough to make climbing exhausting, and just low enough for defenders to politely push your ladder backward with a long stick. Not to mention the rocks, darts, and whatever heavy, unpleasant objects the Byzantines had lying around being generously dropped on their heads. By this point, enemy armies were losing thousands of men and their overall sanity just trying to breach the secondary defense. But let's imagine a scenario where the invaders are incredibly stubborn. They swarm the outer wall, take heavy losses, and finally conquer it. They plant their flag, they cheer, they think they've captured Constantinople and beat the game. Then, the sun is completely blocked out. They look forward, and their cheers turn into whimpers, because standing behind the outer wall is the great inner wall. 12 meters tall, 5 meters thick, and absolutely indestructible. And the soldiers up there are looking down at the invaders like they are annoying little ants. Welcome to Level 3, the final boss. The inner wall was a behemoth. It was 12 meters tall and 5 meters thick. You could literally drive a modern truck on top of it. If an invader somehow reached it, their weapons would basically just tickle the massive limestone blocks. And it wasn't just a flat wall. It was reinforced by 96 massive towers, spaced perfectly to provide overlapping fields of fire. Inside these towers, Byzantine soldiers had storerooms of weapons, food, and plenty of space to relax while the enemy starved outside. Psychologically, it was devastating. Most armies took one look at Level 3, packed their bags, and went home to rethink their careers. Even trying to build a siege tower or ladder tall enough to reach the top was an engineering nightmare that usually ended in gravity winning. For decades, the Theodosian Walls were the ultimate cheat code. Constantinople was completely, undeniably invincible until the year 447 AD, when the one enemy the Byzantines couldn't shoot or bribe decided to attack: Mother Nature. A massive, catastrophic earthquake struck the region, the ground violently tore open, and the invincible cheat code broke. 57 of those mighty towers collapsed into an embarrassing pile of rubble. The emperor was in full panic mode. The ultimate defense system was wide open, exposing the soft, wealthy underbelly of the city. And worst of all, the timing was terrible, because riding across the horizon was the final boss of the 5th century, Attila the Hun. He heard the walls were down, and he was coming for all the gold in the east. The city had just 60 days before Attila arrived. The greatest, most panicked speed-building race in human history was about to begin. Could they rebuild an entire fortress in 2 months? Or was Constantinople about to become Hunnic barbecue? To achieve this impossible speed run, the government enlisted the city's most violent sports hooligans, the chariot racing factions, the Blues and the Greens. Putting aside their bloody rivalry, these hardcore fans formed massive construction gangs, working day and night like a medieval Tetris game. Exactly 60 days later, Attila the Hun finally arrived with his terrifying horde, ready to plunder the ruins. Instead of rubble, he found the walls completely rebuilt, taller than before, and now featuring a brand new moat. Attila stared, presumably sighed in barbarian, literally turned his horse around, and just went to invade Italy instead. The walls saved the city. But fast forward to the 7th century and a massive new threat emerged, not by land, but by sea. The Arab Empire, fresh off conquering half the known world, sent an absolutely colossal armada to blockade Constantinople. They thought, sure, your walls are huge, but they can't stop our navy from starving you out. They were feeling pretty confident. The Byzantines responded by sailing out on small ships, pointing weird bronze tubes at the massive enemy fleet. The enemy probably laughed. What were they going to do? Aggressively squirt water at them? Then, the Byzantines unleashed a literal cheat code: Greek fire. a classified chemical weapon that sprayed liquid death. This wasn't normal fire. It burned intensely bright, stuck to everything it touched, and most horrifyingly, it burned right on top of the water. Panicked sailors tried pouring buckets of water to put it out, but water only made Greek fire burn hotter and explode. Entire fleets were reduced to floating ash. The exact recipe for Greek fire was such a closely guarded state secret that even today, modern scientists still aren't 100% sure how they made it. Another massive win for the empire. For centuries, the land walls repelled every single attack. Constantinople became the wealthiest, most glittering city on the planet. Meanwhile, in Western Europe, the Fourth Crusade was supposed to go to Jerusalem, but they had one major problem. They were completely broke. To pay their debts, they looked at a map, crossed out Jerusalem, and pointed at the richest target on Earth, Constantinople. In 1204, they arrived. They looked at the legendary Theodosian land walls, realized they didn't want to die, and immediately said, nope. But Constantinople had a back door, the sea walls along the Golden Horn. Because they bordered the water, these walls were only a single layer, and much shorter. Using massive Venetian galleys, the Crusaders sailed right up to the sea walls and dropped flying wooden bridges from their ship masts directly onto the battlements. The Byzantine defenders were completely bypassed. The meat grinder was useless because the Crusaders just hopped over the fence like burglars. What followed was one of the most brutal sacks in history. Christian Crusaders destroying a Christian city. They smashed relics, melted down priceless ancient bronze statues to make cheap coins, and stole everything that wasn't nailed down. The Byzantine emperor packed a bag and quite literally ran for the hills. The invincible city had fallen. And the greatest irony of all? The mighty Theodosian land walls never broke. They stood there, perfectly intact, while the city burned behind them. The Byzantines eventually took their city back, but the damage was done. By 1453, the empire was just a shadow of its former self. Enter Sultan Mehmed II of the Ottoman Empire. He was 21, ambitious, and ready to finish the job. He knew standard medieval weapons like arrows and ladders wouldn't even scratch the Theodosian Walls. He needed next-level technology. So he hired an engineer named Orban to build a superweapon, the Basilica Cannon. A gun so comically huge it looked like a cartoon. It was over 8 meters long and required 60 oxen just to drag it across the countryside to Constantinople. This monster fired solid stone balls weighing 270 kilograms. That's like shooting a grizzly bear out of a pipe. The Byzantine defenders looked over the wall, saw this absolute unit of a weapon, and for the first time in 1,000 years, they felt genuine terror. When the cannon fired, the explosion was so incredibly loud, it reportedly caused pregnant women in the city to miscarry. The massive stone ball tore across the sky, completely ignoring the moat, flying right over the outer wall, and smashed directly into the 1,000-year-old inner wall, shattering the indestructible limestone into dust. But there was a catch. The cannon was so big and the metal got so incredibly hot, it could only fire once every 3 hours. During that 3-hour cooldown, the Byzantines frantically ran out and patched the giant holes with literal dirt, mud, and wooden barrels. Because dirt is soft and absorbs impact, when the next cannonball hit, it didn't shatter anything. It just bounced off with a disappointing thud. Mehmed was furious. His ultimate, world-ending siege engine was being countered by literal mud. But Mehmed didn't stop. He set up dozens of smaller cannons alongside the big one, unleashing a relentless 53-day bombardment that slowly, agonizingly ground the walls to dust. On May 29, 1453, after 53 days of non-stop pounding, the impossible happened. The legendary meat grinder was finally broken. Tens of thousands of Ottoman soldiers poured through the breach like a flood. Realizing all was lost, the last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI, refused to surrender. He stripped off his royal purple cloak, drew his sword, and charged directly into the enemy horde. He was never seen again. Sultan Mehmed rode through the rubble. The 1,000-year-old Byzantine Empire was officially dead. But was the wall a failure? Not at all. While the Ottomans looted the city, Byzantine scholars were sneaking out the back doors. They packed into boats and fled across the sea to Italy, carrying their most valuable possessions, ancient books. For centuries, Western Europe had lost the ancient texts of Plato, Aristotle, and the Roman engineers, but the Byzantine walls had kept them safe. When these refugee scholars shared their library with the Italians, it literally blew their medieval minds. This sparked the Renaissance. In a way, the Theodosian Walls didn't just protect a city of gold. They acted as a giant stone hard drive for Western civilization. They absorbed 1,000 years of attacks from the East, buying humanity enough time to prepare for the modern age. Today, parts of the wall still stand in modern Istanbul. Tourists take selfies next to it, mostly unaware of the history. But if you look closely, you can almost see the greatest medieval meat grinder ever built. If you enjoyed this Byzantine speedrun, hit that subscribe button and let us know which impossible piece of history we should unlock next.